I was holding a piece of paper that was so orange it practically vibrated in the sunlight. You know the color. It's the color of traffic cones, prison jumpsuits, and bad decisions. It's a color that exists in nature solely to say, "Don't touch this poisonous frog," or "The nuclear reactor is melting down." In my case, it was taped to my front door with blue painter's tape, which, I might add, is a violation of the HOA bylaw section 7.4 regarding unsightly adhesives. But I wasn't the one holding the clipboard. I peeled it off. It made that ripping sound that feels like Velcro tearing directly off your soul. Notice of violation Oaks of Prestige. Homeowners Association, citation, #849, B offense. Visual obstruction, vegetation height, exceeding regulation. Remedy: immediate reduction to 6 feet or removal. Fine. Pending hearing. I stared at it. Then I looked up. My hedge. My beautiful, glorious 30-year-old privacy hedge. It was a wall of lush, emerald green Thuja occidentalis that wrapped around the front of my property like a comforting hug. It was dense. It was healthy. It smelled like pine and freedom. It was the only thing standing between my morning coffee on the porch and the soul-sucking reality of suburbia. And standing right on the other side of it, peering through the one tiny gap near the driveway like a predatory bird in a floral blouse, was Brenda. Brenda moved in 6 months ago. Before Brenda, the house next door belonged to the Millers, an elderly couple who were legally deaf and made excellent brownies. They were the perfect neighbors. They waved. They didn't care if I mowed my lawn on a Tuesday or a Saturday, and they never, ever looked over the hedge. When they moved to Florida, I thought, well, circle of life. I didn't realize the circle was actually a downward spiral into the 7th circle of hell. Brenda didn't wave. Brenda patrolled. She walked her hairless cat on a leash, a cat that looked like a raw chicken breast with claws, and she carried a notepad. I'd seen her measuring the distance between parked cars and the curb. I'd seen her checking recycling bins for unauthorized cardboard. But I never thought she'd come for the hedge. "Morning, Michael," she chirped. It wasn't a friendly chirp. It was the sound a radar detector makes when it locks onto your speed. I walked down the driveway steps, the neon orange paper crinkling in my fist. I was wearing my bathrobe and slippers. I probably looked like a deranged wizard, but I didn't care. "Brenda," I said. Stopping at the property line. "What is this?" "Oh, you found it." She clapped her hands together. She was wearing gardening gloves, but she wasn't gardening. She was holding a DeWalt tape measure, a laser one, the kind contractors use to build skyscrapers. I was worried the wind might blow it away, so I used the extra strength tape. "This hedge has been here since 1995, I said, my voice low. "It was here before the HOA was even incorporated. It was here before the internet was fast. It was here before you." "Grandfather clauses only apply to structural elements, Michael," she said, reciting it like she had it tattooed on her eyelids. "Vegetation is considered a dynamic landscaping element. Section 4, paragraph C." I looked at the hedge. "It's a plant. It grows. That's what it does." "Exactly." She pointed the laser measure at the top of the greenery. A little red dot danced on the leaves. "And right now, at the apex of the growth, it is measuring 6 feet and 2 inches. The limit is 6 feet. I blinked. 2 inches? 2.4, actually, she corrected, smiling. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of someone who gets a dopamine hit from filing tax returns. It creates a visual barrier. It disrupts the uniform aesthetic flow of the street. I brought it up at the board meeting last night. They agreed. You have to cut it. It's a privacy hedge, Brenda. If I cut it, you can see me. And you can see the street. It opens up the community. I don't want to see the community, I said. I want to drink my coffee without making eye contact with the mailman. She sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of disappointment. Look, I don't make the rules, Michael. I just enforce them for the good of our property values. You have a hearing on Thursday. If it's not rectified by then, the fines start. And, they compound. She turned and walked back toward her house, tugging on the leash of the raw chicken cat. "Come along, Mr. Whiskers. We have to check the Jones garbage cans. It's trash day and I saw a pizza box in the recycling." I stood there in my bathrobe, holding the orange paper, staring at the 2 inches of green leaves that were apparently destroying the moral fabric of the neighborhood. 2 inches. I looked at the hedge. I looked at Brenda's retreating back. "War," I whispered to the leaves. "This is war. Underscore, 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 underscore. The Thursday hearing was held in the community center, Sacre, a building that smelled permanently of floor wax and stale popcorn. The board consisted of 3 people. First, there was Jerry, the president. Jerry was a retired actuary who looked like he had been ironed. His shirt was crisp, his hair was crisp, and I'm pretty sure his personality was starched. He avoided conflict by simply agreeing with whoever spoke loudest. Second was Linda, the secretary. Linda was nice enough, but she was terrified of Brenda. I once saw Brenda criticize Linda's potato salad at a block party, and I think Linda has been suffering from PTSD ever since. And third, sitting in the corner taking supplemental notes, was Brenda. She wasn't technically on the board yet, but she was the head of the compliance committee, which meant she was the prosecutor, the chief witness, and the executioner. I sat in a metal folding chair in the center of the room. It felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a tribunal for war crimes. "Case number 849B, Jerry read from a file, adjusting his glasses. "Michael Henderson, issue regarding, excessive vegetation height." "It's a hedge, Jerry," I said. "It's the same hedge you complimented at the Christmas party 3 years ago. You said it was majestic." Jerry coughed nervously and glanced at Brenda. Brenda stared at him like a viper waiting to strike. "Well," Jerry stammered, "standards change. The community is evolving. We're aiming for a more open concept." "Open concept is for kitchens, Jerry, not for my front yard," I argued. "Look, I'll trim the 2 inches. I'll go out there with a pair of scissors and give it a haircut." Problem solved. "It's not just the height," Brenda interjected. Her voice cut through the room like a jagged knife. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "It's the opacity. The bylaws clearly state that street-facing barriers cannot exceed 6 feet and must allow for light and air permeation. That monstrosity is a solid wall. It's a security risk. Someone could be hiding behind it." "The only thing hiding behind it is me," I said. "Hiding from you." Linda gasped quietly. Jerry looked pained. "Mr. Henderson," Jerry said, trying to regain control. "The rules are the rules. We have to apply them equally. If we let you keep a 6'2" solid hedge, then the Smiths will want a fence, and the Johnsons will want a moat. It's a slippery slope." "A moat sounds nice," I muttered. "Here is the ruling," Jerry said, stamping a piece of paper. "You have 72 hours to bring the property into compliance. This means reducing the height to strictly below 6 feet. Furthermore," he hesitated, reading a note Brenda had slid across the table to him. "Furthermore, due to the density of the foliage, the board recommends, nay requires, that the barrier effect be mitigated. The hedge is simply too imposing." "So you want me to thin it out?" I asked. "Make it see-through?" "We want it compliant," Brenda said, smiling that terrible smile again. "Or you can remove it entirely. Honestly, Michael, removal would be best. It would really open up the curb appeal. Plus, those evergreens are prone to spider mites. I'm doing you a favor." "If I don't?" "Fines," Jerry said apologetically. $500 per day, retroactive to the date of the citation." I did the math in my head. They wanted me to butcher a 30-year-old living thing because Brenda wanted to see my front porch. I felt a heat rising in my chest, a specific kind of rage that only suburban homeowners know. It's the rage of having your castle under siege by people armed with clipboards. 72 hours, I said, standing up. 72 hours, Brenda confirmed. I'll be by with my laser measure on Sunday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. I walked out of the community center. The night air was cool. I got into my truck and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the little orange citation still sitting on my dashboard. They wanted the hedge gone. They wanted an unobstructed view. They wanted to strip away my privacy because of a technicality in a rule book written by people who probably ironed their socks. I started the engine. Okay, I said to the empty cab of my truck. You want compliance? I'll give you compliance. Underscore, 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 underscore. The next 24 hours were a blur of caffeine and internet research. I didn't sleep. I sat at my dining room table, surrounded by stacks of paper. I had the HOA bylaws printed out, all 200 pages of them. I had the county municipal codes. I had the state property statutes. I felt like a lawyer in a movie, looking for the smoking gun. I read about easements. I read about setback lines. I read about permissible foliage. Nothing. They had me on the height. The bylaws were ironclad. No permanent structure or vegetation exceeding 6 feet within 20 feet of the roadway. I was about to give up. I was staring at page 142. Renovations and temporary structures, my eyes glazing over. I took a sip of cold coffee and read a paragraph halfway down the page. Section 12.4. Construction exemptions. During periods of active, permitted home improvement or structural renovation, homeowners are exempt from aesthetic guidelines regarding temporary storage, waste receptacles, and equipment staging, provided such equipment is necessary for the completion of the work. I paused. Equipment staging. I kept reading. Subsection B, sanitation. In accordance with OSHA Standard 1926.51, C. 1, and County Health Code 402. Any construction site where workers are present must provide adequate sanitary facilities if interior facilities are unavailable or restricted. Temporary sanitation units, Porta-Potties, are permitted for the duration of the active permit. I sat up straight. I read it again. Then I read it a third time. Temporary, I whispered. Duration of the active permit. I scrambled to the county website. I needed to know what qualified as a renovation. I found the permit application page. Type of work, landscaping, soil grading. Description, re-leveling of front yard substrate for future Zen garden installation. Estimated duration, 6 months. Permit fee, $45. I looked at the sanitation requirements for the county. If I claimed I was acting as my own general contractor and hiring day laborers, and if I claimed that my home's interior bathrooms were restricted, easy enough, I just had to lock the door, I was legally required by the county to provide a toilet. But one toilet wouldn't replace a hedge. One toilet is just an eyesore. I needed a wall. I went back to the OSHA guidelines. How many toilets per worker? The ratio was standard. But there was no maximum. There was no law saying I couldn't provide luxury accommodation for my imaginary crew. If I wanted to be the most generous foreman in history, I could provide a 1 ratio. And if the staging area for the equipment happened to be the exact footprint of my current hedge, a slow, dark grin spread across my face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found the nuclear launch codes. I grabbed my keys. I needed to go to the rental yard. Underscore, 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 Big Al's Rentals, was located in the industrial part of town, the kind of place where the air smells like diesel and sawdust. Big Al himself was a man shaped like a beer keg, wearing a stained neon vest and chewing on a toothpick that looked like it had been in his mouth since the Carter administration. I walked up to the counter. "Help you?" Al grunted, not looking up from a catalog of excavators. "I have a project," I said. "I need to rent some portable sanitation units." Al looked up. "Toilets? You need a shitter. For a wedding or a job site?" "Job site," I said. "Residential, front yard." "How many? I got the standard blue or I got the VIP, which has a little shelf for your phone. Costs $10 more." "I don't care about the shelf," I said. "I care about the dimensions. How wide is a standard unit?" Al narrowed his eyes. "About 44 inches. Why?" "I have a specific space to fill," I said. "I need to cover a linear distance of roughly 45 feet. Al stopped chewing the toothpick. He did some mental math. 45 feet? That's like 12 units. Maybe 13 if you pack 'em tight. 13, I said. 13 sounds like a lucky number. And I need them tall. Standard height is what, 7 feet? 7.5 on the skids, Al said. He leaned over the counter. "Buddy, what kind of job are you running at a residential house that needs 13 shitters? You digging a tunnel to Mexico?" "I'm regrading the soil," I said calmly. "It's a very intensive project. I expect a lot of fluid intake." Al stared at me. He looked at my clean polo shirt, my manicured hands, and the glint of pure insanity in my eyes. He'd seen guys like me before. He knew the look. "HOA?" Al asked. "HOA," I confirmed. Al let out a bark of laughter that sounded like a chainsaw starting up. He slapped the counter. "I hate those bastards. My HOA fined me for parking my work truck in my own driveway. Said it was commercial blight." "They told me my hedge was 2 inches too tall," I said. "So I have to take it down. But I need a place for my crew to go." Al was grinning now. He typed furiously on his dirty keyboard. 13 units, I got a fresh batch. Bright blue, like electric blue. You can see 'em from space. And the roofs are translucent orange. They glow when the sun hits them. "Perfect," I said. "Can you zip tie them together?" "For structural stability?" Al winked. "Absolutely. Safety first. OSHA requires secured staging. I can deliver them Monday morning. 7 a.m.? "Make it Sunday," I said. "Sunday at 7 a.m. I'll pay extra for the weekend delivery." "Sunday at 7, Al agreed. "I'll drive the truck myself. I want to see this." I paid the deposit. It was expensive, but freedom isn't free. As I walked out, Al shouted after me. "Hey, you want the cleaning service?" "Oh, definitely," I said. "I want the truck to come by twice a week. The big truck, the loud one." Al gave me a thumbs up. Underscore, 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 underscore. Saturday was D-Day, Demolition Day. I woke up at dawn. The birds were singing, blissfully unaware of the violence that was about to occur. I put on my work boots, my heavy canvas pants, and a pair of safety goggles. I went to the garage and retrieved my chainsaw. It was a Steel, a beast of a machine. I checked the gas. I checked the oil. I pulled the cord. Ra-ga-ga. The sound ripped through the quiet morning air. I walked around to the front yard. Brenda's curtains twitched immediately. She was awake. Of course she was awake. She probably slept hanging upside down in a closet. I walked up to the Hedge, my old friend. We had good times. It had shielded me from the world. But it was a soldier, and sometimes soldiers have to make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the Thuja, "but you will be avenged." I revved the saw. I didn't just trim the top. I didn't just give it a haircut. I went for the knees. I started at the far end of the driveway and sliced through the thick trunks, 6 inches from the ground. The first section toppled with a heavy whoosh. The smell of fresh pine sap filled the air. It was the smell of a massacre. I worked methodically. Section by section, the green wall fell. The view of the street opened up. I could see the asphalt. I could see the fire hydrant. Oh, I could see Brenda's house in all its beige glory. By 9 a.m., it was done. The hedge was gone. In its place was a strip of churned-up earth and a row of pathetic little stumps. I was sweating, covered in sawdust. I turned off the chainsaw. The silence was deafening. Well, I turned around. Brenda was standing on her porch, holding a mug of tea. She was beaming. She actually looked human for a second. She was so happy. "I have to say, Michael, I'm impressed," she called out. "I didn't think you'd actually do it. It looks so much bigger, so much more open. Now we can see your lovely brickwork." I wiped sweat from my forehead. "Rules are rules, Brenda. You were right. It was an obstruction." She walked down her driveway, practically skipping. She stopped at the property line, looking at the devastation with satisfaction. "See? Isn't that better? Now the neighborhood flows. It's compliant." "It is," I agreed. "Totally compliant. The view is breathtaking." "I'll let the board know you've cooperated," she said benevolently. "No fines for you. Good boy." She turned to leave. "Oh, Brenda," I called out. She turned back. "Yes?" "Just a heads up," I said, pointing to the strip of dirt where the hedge used to be. "Since I'm doing so much work on the yard now, to keep it up to your standards, I'm starting a major renovation project. Regrading the soil, Zen garden, that sort of thing." "Oh, lovely," she said. "A Zen garden sounds very peaceful. Just make sure you submit the plans for the rocks. We have strict rules about gravel color." "Don't worry," I said, my face a mask of polite neutrality. "Everything will be strictly according to code. I've got the permits and everything. The crew starts tomorrow." "Wonderful," she said. "Keep up the good work." She went back inside. I stood there, looking at the empty space. I imagined the wall of blue plastic that was coming. I imagined the smell of chemical sanitizer baking in the sun. I imagined the look on her face. "Zen," I whispered. "It's going to be very, very zen. Underscore, 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 underscore. Sunday morning, 6:55 a.m. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the sky in soft pastels. It was the kind of Sunday morning that real estate agents dream about. Quiet, serene. Then the rumble started. It wasn't thunder. It was a low, guttural vibration that shook the coffee in my mug. I was sitting on my front steps, waiting. A massive flatbed truck turned the corner. It was huge. It took up both lanes. And strapped to the back of it, glowing like radioactive monoliths, were 13 portable toilets. They weren't just blue. Al wasn't lying. They were electric cobalt. They were the blue of a cheap slushie. The roofs were a jarring, translucent pumpkin orange. The truck hissed its air brakes and backed up to my curb. Beep, 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 the backup alarm was piercing. It echoed off the houses. Lights flicked on in the neighborhood. Curtains moved. Al hopped out of the cab. He was wearing a hard hat and holding a clipboard. He looked at me and grinned. "Where do you want him, boss?" he shouted, his voice booming in the quiet street. I pointed to the dirt strip where the hedge used to be. "Right on the property line, Al. As close to the sidewalk as legal. Line them up, shoulder to shoulder. I want a wall." "You got it." Al and his assistant, a guy named Skeeter, who looked like he wrestled alligators, got to work. They unstrapped the first unit. They wrestled it off the lift gate. Thud. They placed it right at the corner of the driveway. Then the next one. Thud. Then the next one. Thud. They worked fast. Within 20 minutes, the wall was taking shape. It was magnificent in its hideousness. A solid 45-foot-long, 7.5-foot-tall barrier of plastic. Brenda's front door flew open. She came out in a silk robe, her hair in rollers. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Michael!" she shrieked. It wasn't a chirp this time. It was a full-blown siren. "Michael Henderson! What in God's name is this?" I didn't answer immediately. I walked over to the newly installed unit #4. I slapped the plastic side. It made a hollow, resonant thwack. "Morning." "Brenda!" I shouted over the idling truck engine. "Renovation starting! Safety first!" She ran down her driveway, stopping just short of the blue wall. She looked up at it. It towered over her. It blocked her view of my house. It blocked her view of the street. It blocked the sun. "What are these?" she sputtered, pointing a shaking finger. These are toilets." "Sanitation units," I corrected, pulling the permit out of my back pocket. "Per OSHA standard 1926.51. I have a crew coming. Gotta provide facilities." "A crew? What crew?" "Soil specialists," I said. "Very specialized. High-fiber diet." "You can't do this!" she screamed. Her face was turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with the blue plastic. "This is a violation. Section 9. Aesthetic nuisance, sanitary hazard. It's disgusting." "Actually," I said, holding up the permit. "It's exempt. Temporary structures for active construction. Section 12.4. I read the book, Brenda. I read the whole book." She stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. She looked at the toilets. She looked at Al, who was currently zip-tying Unit #7 to Unit #8 with a plastic tie the size of a snake. "Al, make sure those are tight," I called out. "Don't want them tipping over in the wind." "Solid as a rock, boss," Al yelled back. "I'm calling the police," Brenda screeched. "I'm calling the board. I'm calling the city." "Go ahead," I said, leaning back against the plastic door of Unit #1. "I'll be right here, in my office." I opened the door to the porta-potty and stepped inside, just to make a point. I sat down on the lid, clothed, obviously, and waited. The war of the Hedge was over. The war of the throne had just begun. Underscore, 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 underscore. The police arrived in record time, which told me Brenda must have used the words terrorist act or hostage situation on the 911 call. 2 cruisers rolled up. Officer Miller stepped out of the first one. I knew Miller. He was a good guy. He coached the local Little League team and looked like he was perpetually 5 minutes away from retirement, regardless of his actual age. He looked at the wall of toilets. He took off his sunglasses. He rubbed his eyes. He put his sunglasses back on. Brenda was waiting for him at the curb, practically vibrating. "Officer! Thank God! Look at this! Just look at it!" She gestured wildly at the blue monolith. "He's insane! He's turned our neighborhood into a festival, a construction site. It's a health hazard." My property value just dropped 50% in an hour. Officer Miller walked over slowly. He hitched up his belt. He looked at me. I was standing in my driveway, wearing my hard hat, which I had purchased specifically for this bit. "Morning, Mike," Miller said. "Morning, officer," I said. "Nice day for it." "For what? A chili cook-off?" Miller gestured to the units. "What's going on here?" "Renovations," I said. "I'm regrading the yard. Got a permit." I handed him the clipboard. Miller looked at the permit. He looked at the OSHA printout I had stapled to the front of it. He read the lines I had highlighted in yellow. 13 units? Miller asked, raising an eyebrow. "How many guys you got working?" "It varies," I said. "Could be 2, could be 50. I like to be prepared. You know what they say. Better to have it and not need it. Whoa, than need it and not have it." Miller looked at the wall. He looked at Brenda, who was tapping her foot so hard she was practically drilling for oil. He's doing it to spite me, Brenda yelled. He cut down his hedge because I cited him, and now he's put this up. It's malicious. Is it malicious, Mike? Miller asked. It's compliance, officer, I said innocently. The HOA demanded I remove the visual obstruction of the hedge. I did. Now I'm doing permitted work. The law requires sanitation. These are temporary. As soon as the work is done, in 6 months, they'll be gone. Miller bit the inside of his cheek. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He looked at the toilets again. He looked at the Turbo Flush 3,000 inches logo on the door of the one closest to Brenda's driveway. Ma'am, Miller said, turning to Brenda. Arrest him, she demanded, or at least make him take them down. I can't, Miller said. He has a valid permit, and he's right about the code. If he has an open permit for renovations, he's allowed to have equipment staging. And, unfortunately for you, this counts as equipment. But it's ugly. Being ugly isn't a crime, ma'am, Miller said. If it were, a lot of modern art would be in evidence lockers. He turned back to me. Mike, keep the noise down, and try to keep the smell contained. They're fresh, officer. Smell like lavender and victory. Miller shook his head. He walked back to his car. As he got in, I saw him pick up his radio. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw his shoulders shaking. He was laughing. Brenda stood there for a moment, stunned. The police had failed her. The law had failed her. She was staring down the barrel of 13 plastic outhouses. She let out a sound of pure frustration, a high-pitched "ugh!" and stormed back into her house. She slammed the door. I looked at my wall. It was hideous. It was beautiful. But I knew this was just the opening skirmish. The HOA board meeting was tomorrow night, and I had one more trick up my sleeve. I took out my phone and dialed a number. Hey, Dave, I said into the phone. Yeah, it's Mike. You know how your son plays the drums, the really loud ones? Yeah. Does his band want a place to practice this week? I've got a construction site that needs some acoustic testing. The week that followed the installation of the blue wall became known in the neighborhood as the Week of the Blue Haze. To the casual observer, it might have looked like a legitimate, albeit confusing, a construction site. To Brenda, it was a psychological operation designed by a madman. And she was right. I knew that for the permit to remain valid, the site had to be active. The county code defined active loosely, but it generally meant that personnel had to be present and work had to be occurring during standard business hours. So I hired the best crew money could buy. My poker buddies. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Dave, Tony, and Big Steve rolled up in their various pickup trucks. I had purchased a bulk pack of high-visibility neon yellow vests and 4 hard hats. I also bought a box of donuts and a cooler full of hydration fluids, which were strictly non-alcoholic until 5 p.m., per OSHA, sort of. All right, listen up, I told them as we stood in the driveway, surrounded by the towering plastic sentinels. Your job today is vital. We are conducting a substrate density analysis. That means you stand around, look at the ground, point at things with a clipboard, and occasionally frown. Do we have to dig? Big Steve asked. Steve was the accountant, and the heaviest thing he usually lifted was a stapler. Absolutely not, I said. Digging creates mess. We are in the observation phase. But, and this is crucial, you must use the facilities. Often. The doors on these units have a very specific high-tension spring. When you let go, they slam shut with a noise that sounds like a gunshot inside a plastic drum. I want to hear that sound. It is the sound of progress. The boys suited up. We looked like a hazardous materials team responding to a radioactive spill, except we were just 4 middle-aged men standing in a dirt patch eating crullers. At 8:15 a.m., Brenda came out. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, presumably to block out the glare of the electric cobalt plastic. She marched up to the property line where I was solemnly inspecting a patch of weeds with a magnifying glass. Who are these people? She demanded. Specialists, Brenda, I said, not looking up. Geological surveyors, top men. They're eating donuts. Fuel, I corrected. High-calorie intake is required for this level of mental exertion. The soil density here is troubling. We might be looking at a sinkhole risk. Good thing we caught it. Dave, who is a terrible actor, chose that moment to loudly slap a mosquito on his neck and yell, "Damn nature!" Brenda glared at him, then looked back at me. "I'm watching you, Michael. The board is watching you. You're violating the noise ordinance." "Noise ordinance doesn't kick in until 10 p.m., Brenda," I said. "Right now, it's the sweet sound of industry." As if on cue, Big Steve walked over to Unit Hash 1, the one closest to Brenda's driveway, naturally. He opened the door. Creak. He stepped in. He let the door go. Wham-clack. The sound echoed off the brick facade of Brenda's house. It was magnificent. A hollow, percussive thud that resonated in your chest. Brenda flinched. 30 seconds later, Steve came out. Creak! He let the door go. Wham-clack! "System check complete," Steve announced loudly. "Pressure is nominal." Brenda let out a strangled noise and retreated inside. I saw her blinds snap shut, but I knew she was there, watching, waiting. The real fun began on Wednesday. I had arranged for the servicing. Now, usually, when you rent a porta-potty, they come by once a week to clean it out. It's a quiet, shameful affair done in the early hours, but I had specifically requested the deep clean package from Big Al, and Big Al, bless his heart, sent the Leviathan. The truck that turned onto our street at noon on Wednesday was not a normal truck. It was a septic tanker from the 1980s that had clearly seen some things. It was rust-colored, massive, and had an exhaust pipe that spewed black smoke like a coal train. The engine didn't idle. It roared. It sounded like a dinosaur choking on a tractor. The driver, a man named Gus, who was shaped like a vending machine, parked the truck directly in front of Brenda's house. He didn't have to, but he did. He engaged the air brakes. Psh, hiss! A cloud of dust kicked up from the street. Then he turned on the pump. If you have never heard a commercial septic vacuum pump operating at full capacity, imagine a jet engine sucking a bowling ball through a straw. It is a high-pitched whine overlaid with a deep, gurgling thrum that vibrates the fillings in your teeth. Ree, gug, 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 ree. The noise was apocalyptic. Birds took flight from 3 streets over. Dogs started howling. Gus hopped out, dragging a hose that was thick as a python. He dragged it across the sidewalk, right past Brenda's welcome mat. He moved with agonizing slowness. He hooked it up to Unit Hash 1. He stood there, hand on the valve, staring directly at Brenda's window. He gave a little wave. I was sitting on my porch, wearing ear defenders, drinking an iced tea. I saw Brenda's front door fly open. She stormed out, her face a mask of pure fury. She was screaming something. But the pump was so loud I couldn't hear a word. It was like watching a silent movie of a woman having a breakdown. She pointed at the truck. She pointed at me. She pointed at the sky. Gus, who was a true professional, just pointed at his ear protection and shrugged. "Can't hear you, lady. Vacuum's on," he bellowed, his voice booming over the chaos. She stomped over to me. I lifted one ear cup. "Illegal! This is harassment! The smell!" she was shrieking. "It's actually odorless," I shouted back. "That's the smell of hygiene, Brenda. We're keeping it clean for the community." "I'm calling the EPA." "They're already here," I lied, pointing at the truck. "Gus is certified." She lasted about 2 minutes before the noise drove her back inside. Gus took his time. He cleaned all 13 units. He cleaned them twice. He wiped down the handles. He checked the fluid levels. He probably spent 45 minutes out there, and the pump never stopped screaming. When he finally drove away, leaving a lingering scent of blue chemical sanitizer and diesel fumes in the air, the silence that descended on the neighborhood was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the artillery stops. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA. Subject: urgent. Cease and desist nuisance activity. From Oaks of Prestige Board of Directors, Mr. Henderson. Several complaints have been lodged regarding the industrial equipment and excessive noise emanating from your property. While we acknowledge your renovation permit, the volume of the maintenance activities is disrupting the peace of the community. You are hereby ordered to cease all commercial vehicle activity immediately or face a fine of $1,000 per incident. I smiled. I cracked my knuckles and typed a reply. Dear Board, Please find attached a copy of the County Municipal Code, Section 88.2, regarding essential sanitation maintenance. The code states that maintenance of sanitary facilities on permitted job sites is mandatory and cannot be restricted by local noise ordinances during daylight hours, 7 a.m., 6 p.m. Furthermore, denying the servicing of these units would create a biohazard risk, which I am sure the board does not want to be liable for. If you would like me to stop cleaning the toilets, please sign the attached waiver accepting full legal responsibility for any resulting cholera, dysentery, or unpleasant olfactory events. Regards, Mike. I hit send. I knew they wouldn't sign. They were trapped. They had used the rules to bludgeon me, and now I was using the rules to build a fortress around myself, but the war wasn't over. Brenda was resourceful, and on Friday she changed tactics. I was out in the yard doing my morning inspection, kicking a dirt clod, when a sedan pulled up. It wasn't the police. It was a silver Lexus. A man in a cheap suit got out. He had a clipboard. "Mr. Henderson?" "That's me." "I'm Greg Stevenson from the county zoning office." My heart skipped a beat. This was Brenda's nuclear option. She had gone over the HOA's head and called the actual government. If the county pulled my permit, the game was over. The toilets would have to go, and I'd be left with a dirt yard and a fine. "Morning, Greg," I said, projecting confidence I didn't feel. "What can I do for you?" "We received a tip," Greg said, looking at the blue wall with a mixture of confusion and awe. "An anonymous tip, claiming that this isn't a valid construction site, claiming that it's a spite fence." "Spite fence?" I laughed. "That's ridiculous. I'm building a Zen garden, major earthworks. These are for the crew." Greg walked over to the units. He walked down the line. He counted them. 13 units, Mr. Henderson, for a residential lot. We usually see one, maybe two." "I take worker comfort very seriously, Greg," I said. "Union rules. You know how it is." Greg looked at the ground. He looked at the untouched dirt where the hedge used to be. "There doesn't seem to be much work happening. The permit is for soil grading. The ground looks undisturbed." "We're in the planning phase," I said quickly. "Settling period. Can't rush the earth." Greg sighed. He looked tired. He was a bureaucrat, not a detective, but he had a job to do. "Look, Mr. Henderson, I'm not stupid, and neither is the person who called this in. The code says the sanitation must be commensurate with the scale of the project. You don't have a crew here. You have a wall of toilets. I'm going to have to issue a citation and revoke the permit unless I see substantial progress and a workforce that justifies this capacity within 48 hours. He handed me a yellow slip. Warning of permit revocation. 48 hours? I asked. Monday morning, Greg said. I'll be back. If I don't see a legitimate construction operation requiring 13 toilets, the permit is pulled, and you have to remove these things by Tuesday. He got back in his Lexus and drove away. I stood there, holding the yellow slip. I looked at Brenda's house. She was in the window. She gave me a little wave, a sarcastic, nasty little wave. She had won. She knew I didn't have a real crew. She knew I wasn't actually building anything massive. She had called my bluff. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table. I put my head in my hands. I had the poker buddies, but they weren't a workforce. They were guys drinking beer. Greg wanted to see substantial progress. He wanted to see a reason for 13 toilets. I needed a miracle. Or, specifically, I needed a lot of people who needed to use the bathroom. I looked at the calendar. Saturday, Sunday. Monday morning was the deadline. Then, I remembered the phone call I had made to Dave earlier in the week. The one about his son's band. I picked up my phone. I dialed Dave. "Dave," I said, "is your kid's band still looking for a place to practice?" "Yeah," Dave said. "My garage is off limits since the incident with the drywall." "How many people are in the band?" "4. Why?" "That's not enough," I muttered. "Dave, does your kid know other bands? Like, a lot of other bands?" "He's in the local scene," Dave said. "They have this collective thing. Why?" "I have a proposition," I said. a plan forming in my desperate, caffeinated brain. I need you to tell your son that I am hosting a Battle of the Bands, a charity event, Rock for Soil Health. Or something. You're doing what? I need bodies, Dave. I need noise. I need activity. And most importantly, I need a crowd that drinks a lot of water and needs a lot of toilets. Tell him I'm hosting a free venue. Open mic, Sunday afternoon. All day. Mike, Dave said, you're going to have a bunch of punk kids in your yard. No, I said, looking out the window at the blue wall. I'm going to have a workforce. I'm going to have acoustic soil compaction specialists. And if Brenda thought the vacuum truck was loud, she hasn't heard a garage punk band trying to play a cover of Enter Sandman through a blown-out amp. I hung up. I started making calls. I called the local university's geology department student union. I called a guy I knew who ran a food truck. If the county wanted to see a site that required 13 toilets, I was going to give them a festival. Sunday arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I had spent Saturday prepping the site, which mostly involved putting up caution tape and setting up a makeshift stage made of plywood pallets in the center of the yard, which technically counted as form work for the inspection. By noon, the first workers arrived. They weren't construction workers. They were teenagers with nose rings, carrying guitars, drum kits, and amplifiers. They were the sonic vibration testing crew. All right, everyone, I shouted through a megaphone as they piled into the yard. Welcome to the site. Remember, safety first. Hard hats are available in the bin. And please, for the love of God, keep hydrated and use the provided facilities. By 1 p.m., my front yard looked like a bizarre cross between Woodstock and a construction site. There were about 50 kids. Darn. A food truck, Taco About It, had pulled into the driveway. I told them I was the foreman, and this was catering. The music started at 1:15. The first band was called Terminal Anxiety. They were terrible. They were loud. They played 3 chords, and the drummer seemed to be at war with his kit. Ka-chunk, scree! The sound blasted through the neighborhood. It bounced off the blue wall of toilets, which acted as a surprisingly effective acoustic reflector, beaming the noise directly at Brenda's house. I saw Brenda come out. She looked like she was about to explode. She marched over to the fence. "What is this?" she screamed. I walked over, wearing my hard hat and a high-vis vest. I couldn't hear her, so I used the megaphone. "Soil compaction." I amplified my voice so it echoed down the street. "Acoustic vibration therapy. We're settling the dirt, Brenda. It's very scientific." "This is a concert," she shrieked. "It's work," I yelled back. "Look at them working." I pointed to the mosh pit that had formed near the plywood stage. A dozen teenagers were jumping up and down, slamming into each other. "Manual tamping," I shouted. "They are tamping the soil with their feet. Very efficient." And the best part? They were using the toilets. With 50 kids drinking soda and eating tacos, the blue wall was seeing constant action. Doors were opening and slamming. Wham-clack, wham-clack. It was a symphony of sanitation. Officer Miller showed up again around 2 p.m. He looked weary. "Mike," he said, leaning out the window of his cruiser. "We got a noise complaint, obviously." "Construction noise, officer," I said, running over. "We're vibrating the substrate. It's a crucial step before the gravel laydown." Miller looked at the kid with the green mohawk screaming into a microphone about anarchy. He looked at the "Caution, Men at Work" sign I had taped to the bass drum. "Mike," Miller said, "that's a punk band." "They are independent contractors," I insisted. "And look, they are utilizing the required sanitary facilities. If I didn't have those 13 units, we'd have a public health crisis on our hands. I'm in full compliance with the county warning I got on Friday." Miller rubbed his temples. "The county guy is coming tomorrow?" 8 a.m., I said. "I need to show substantial site usage." Miller looked at Brenda, who was standing on her porch filming the whole thing with her phone, looking like she was witnessing the fall of Rome. Then he looked at the kids having the time of their lives. "Shut it down by 6 p.m., Miller said. "Strictly 6 p.m. If I get one call at 6:01, I'm shutting you down and I'm taking your megaphone." You got it, officer. The work continued all afternoon. The ground was definitely getting compacted. The grass was gone, replaced by trampled mud. It looked like a legitimate, chaotic job site. At 6 p.m. sharp, I cut the power to the amps. "All right, crew," I shouted. "Shift's over. Great work today. The dirt is very settled. Clear out." They dispersed, leaving behind a yard that looked like a disaster zone, which, for my purposes, was perfect. It looked like work had happened. Monday morning, 8 a.m., Greg from the zoning office pulled up. He stepped out of his car and stopped dead. My yard was a mess of mud, boot prints, and plywood. There were empty water bottles, I had scattered them artfully, and the remnants of the work. I was standing there with Big Steve and Dave, all of us wearing vests, looking exhausted. "Morning, Greg," I wheezed. "Hell of a weekend. We really pushed the schedule." Greg walked onto the property. He looked at the churned-up mud from the mosh pit. He looked at the toilets, which clearly had been used. He checked the indicators on the side. You did all this in 2 days?" Greg asked, kicking a piece of plywood. 3 shifts, I said. "Had a massive crew, subcontractors. We vibrated the hell out of this soil. It's ready for the gravel now." Greg looked at the blue wall. He looked at Brenda's house. Brenda was nowhere to be seen. "Well," Greg said, scratching his head, "I can't say it's not active. The ground is definitely disturbed. So, and you clearly had a crew here big enough to justify the sanitation." He marked a box on his clipboard. "All right, Mr. Henderson, permit stands. You're good for another 6 months. Just try to keep the noise down." "Absolutely, Greg. We're moving into the silent contemplation phase of the garden next." Greg drove away. I let out a breath I had been holding for 3 days. I looked at Dave. "We did it." "We did it," Dave agreed. "But my ears are ringing." I turned to look at Brenda's house. I expected her to be there, scowling, but the curtains were drawn tight. That afternoon, the mailman delivered a letter. It wasn't in the usual HOA envelope. It was a heavy, cream-colored envelope with a wax seal. No, just a fancy sticker. It was a personal letter from Jerry, the HOA president. "Michael, we surrender. The board held an emergency meeting last night. The noise, the trucks, the punk rock soil tamping, it's too much. Mrs. Brenda Miller has threatened to sue the HOA for emotional distress and failure to control the environment. Half the neighborhood is threatening to stop paying dues until the blue monolith is gone. We are prepared to offer a compromise. 1. You remove the toilets immediately. 2. You remove the Porta-Potties. Yes, I wrote it twice because I mean it. 3. The HOA will grant you a lifetime exemption from Regulation 4. C. Vegetation height. 4. The HOA will pay for the installation of a new hedge, species of your choice, up to 8 feet in initial height. 5. Brenda has been removed from the Compliance Committee. We found a bylaw that says committee members must be of sound temperament, and after the vacuum truck incident, we voted that she no longer qualifies. Please, Mike, make it stop. Sincerely, Jerry." I read the letter. I looked at the blue wall. It had served me well. It had stood tall against tyranny. It had smelled terrible, looked worse, and sounded like a gun range, but it had won. I walked over to Unit Hash 1. I patted the plastic door. "Good job, soldier," I whispered. I pulled out my phone and texted Big Al. "Mission accomplished. Come pick 'em up, and bring the biggest trees you have in stock. Underscore, 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 2 weeks later. I sat on my front porch. The air was crisp. The smell of blue chemical fluid was just a memory, replaced by the scent of fresh cedar mulch. In front of me stood a row of magnificent 8-foot-tall, emerald-green arborvitae trees. They were lush. They were dense. They were taller than the old ones. CS. And because the HOA paid for mature specimens, they looked like they had been there for years. I couldn't see the street. I couldn't see the sidewalk. And most importantly, I couldn't see Brenda. I took a sip of my coffee. Somewhere, on the other side of the green wall, I heard a door open. "Mr. Whiskers!" Brenda's voice called out. But it was softer now. Defeated. "Don't go near the hedge, Mr. Whiskers. It's protected." I smiled. I leaned back in my chair, invisible to the world, the king of my castle once again. I still kept the neon orange hard hat on the shelf in the garage, though, just in case. You never know when you might need to do some renovations.